Ketchup, potato chips, and milk kept in bags. Games played on ice and red leaves sewn on flags. Tragically hip songs for us all to sing. These are a few of my Canadian things. In case you didn't know, it's Canada Day this week. Happy birthday, Canada! And because I am Canadian, and this was the only way to ensure this would be a respectful list, and not one filled with South Park voices, I'm here to celebrate the greatest Canucks to ever grace the squared circle. And probably still make fun of this country, because who am I kidding? I just made a Timmy's run and saw a moose being pulled on a dog sled in June. There are a metric ton of talented Canadian wrestlers who have done more than enough to be highlighted, but this is a list for only 10. Thus, only the greatest of the Great White North can make the cut. Will this be the cause for great debate in the comments? Oh, you betcha. I'm Tempest, hailing from partsFUNknown, and these are the 10 greatest Canadian professional wrestlers of all time. But before we get on with the show, make sure to subscribe to partsFUNknown so you don't miss a fun wrestling list just like this one. And while you're at it, why don't you watch Adam Blampier's latest list of the 10 best Money in the Bank ladder matches of all time. We often put an honorable mention in our lists, whether it be because we reached 11 entries and we simply couldn't part with even one of them, or because it really is imperative that we include Scotty 2 Hottie versus Dean Malenko in our list of best Backlash matches. There would be riots in the streets otherwise. But for this list, the honorable mentions go a bit deeper because you really could make the argument for all of the following names to be on this list. However, just missing the button are Kyle O'Reilly, Stu Hart, Christian, Bobby Roode, Lance Storm, Petey Williams, Ethan Page, Josh Alexander, Rick Martel, Edouard Carpentier, Archie Goldie, Abdullah the Butcher, Natalia, Rocky Johnson, Kevin Owens, PCO, Sami Zayn, and Canadians who moved to the country later in life, otherwise they would both be on this list, Sweet Daddy Siki and Brock Lesnar. Now with that out of the way, grab your Mickey and let's get started. Number 10, Trish Stratus. Born in Toronto, Ontario, Trish Stratus did not grow up thinking she would become one of the greatest wrestlers in Canadian history. No, she planned to be a doctor, but she made the mistake many Canadians make, enrolling in York University, whose faculty went on strike in 1997 and forced her to change her life plans. Footnote here, I frequented York U from 2014 to 2018, and in those 5 years, they went on strike 3 times, so I've really never related to Trish Stratus more than I do now. Breaking into WWE in early 2000, Trish wasn't the polished performer she would become, but she got there quickly, working with a stacked women's division at the time. Trish established herself as WWE's Diva of the Decade, and by the time she left wrestling full-time in 2006, she was considered by WWE to be the best women's wrestler ever, having won the WWE Women's Championship a then record 7 times. While that position is up for debate now, there is no debate over how big a role Trish played as the top women's star on Raw. She came out at WrestleMania 18 with a maple leaf on her butt, and I can speak from experience when I say there aren't many things more Canadian than that. Number 9, Owen Hart. Born in Calgary, Alberta, Owen Hart was the youngest child of House Hart, growing up in a wrestling family with 11 older siblings. Owen didn't have the kayfabe accolades that his brother Brett did, but his peers have often said that if push came to shove, Owen Hart was the best wrestler in the family, and again, considering the family we're talking about, that is no small amount of praise. That being said, he had no shortage of accolades either. Owen won every championship in WWE aside from the world title, multiple Slammy Awards, and the King of the Ring, with many still considering him the best to have ever worn the crown. Mid-90s WWF wasn't the best time for workers of Owen's caliber, what with all the plumbers and garbage men around, but Owen showed many times why he was a cut above the rest with his consistently entertaining character work in between stellar matches, putting on groundbreaking performances with Black Tiger and New Japan Pro Wrestling as well. Had Owen not tragically passed away in 1999, he would almost undoubtedly have been one of the biggest benefactors of the wave of credible mid-card talent who arrived in the WWF in 2000. Had he gotten to have matches with Guerrero, Malenko, Jericho, Benoit, Angle, etc., Owen would have been revered even more than he is today, which is freaking loads. Number 8, Edge. Born in Orangeville, Ontario, that's right, Edge isn't even from Toronto proper, the hoser. Edge won free wrestling training by entering a write-in essay contest. Had he not, odds are there would have never been a rated R superstar, an ultimate opportunist, or a man who cheers for a second hockey team because he can't handle the heat of being a Leafs fan. Insert obligatory The Rock line about the Maple Leafs here. In all seriousness, Edge broke into the WWE in 1998 after working the North American independent scene during the 90s with Christian by his side. Edge has won more WWE titles than any other wrestler, winning 11 world titles, 5 IC titles, a bajillion tag titles, Money in the Bank twice, the Royal Rumble twice, and a King of the Ring. That is a resume. Making up for all those titles the Leafs can't win. Edge quickly became one of WWE's most reliable all-around performers during the Ruthless Aggression era, and while he might not be the single greatest at any one of wrestling promos or angles, there are very few who are able to do all as masterfully as Edge. Number 7, Kenny Omega. Born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Kenny Omega became one of the biggest lightning rods for discussion in pro wrestling over the course of the late 2010s. To some, he's a creative genius, capable of putting on some of the best matches in the history of the sport, while to others, he's the embodiment of the death of pro wrestling, only capable of wrestling a 9-year-old girl. I'll let you guess which side of the debate we fall under, but the title of this video should probably be a bit of a giveaway. Kenny Omega jettisoned to the top of New Japan Pro Wrestling upon joining Bullet Club, and his success in New Japan, bringing international eyes onto the product, was as big a factor in the creation of All Elite Wrestling as could be. Whether it be his work to normalize queer storytelling in wrestling, his laundry list of 5-star matches, or the proven impact he's had on the wrestling business, Kenny Omega is a true first ballot Hall of Famer in every sense, and if that bothers you, let's discuss it over some Timbits. Number 6, Chris Jericho. Born in Toronto, Ontario.
He's from Winnipeg, you idiot!
Born on Long Island, New York, but raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Chris Jericho's career cannot be recapped in 200 words. This entire section could be spent highlighting his work as Corazon de Leon in Mexico, or working with Ultimo Dragon in WAR, or suplexing Taz in ECW, or his countless bits trying to make his mark in WCW, or his legendary WWF debut, or winning the WWF Undisputed Championship and main eventing WrestleMania, or winning the Intercontinental Championship 9 times, or reinventing himself with his Honest Man character and rivalry with Shawn Michaels, or causing a surge of New Japan World subscriptions with his match against Kenny Omega, or being the first AEW World Champion, or having his own karaoke entrance theme sung by himself, or fighting his own hockey player father in a charity hockey game at Madison Square Garden. No, actually, I think it will be that, because that is the most Canadian thing I could possibly include on this list. Number 5, Gene Kiniski. Born in Edmonton, Alberta, Gene Kiniski dubbed himself Canada's greatest athlete as he reigned for 1,131 days as NWA World's Heavyweight Champion from 1966 to 1969. Yep. Sorry, Wayne Gretzky, Donovan Bailey, Steve Nash, Marie-Philippe Poulin, Bianca Andreescu, Andre DeGrasse, and Christine Sinclair, Gene Kiniski called dibs on being the best. While it certainly isn't the case today, being the NWA World Champion in 1969 was the highest point you could reach in professional wrestling, and Gene Kiniski represented his home and native land while putting together an incredible body of work, earning him a place in virtually every wrestling Hall of Fame in existence. That's a legacy you won't get plain shinny. You've probably seen him during your years as a fan, even without recognizing him, with Kiniski remaining involved with wrestling throughout his career, even serving as referee for Ric Flair and Harley Race's legendary NWA World Championship cage match at the first ever Starrcade. Number 4, Whipper Billy Watson. Born in East York, Ontario, now part of Toronto, so you know we're diving deep into the great Canadian history books for this one, Whipper Billy Watson was convinced to skip work to go learn how to wrestle at the local YMCA. So you see, kids, if you skip work to go to the YMCA, you too can be a Canadian hero. No other requirements needed. You guys want to know how he came to be known as Whipper Billy Watson? Well, because he used an Irish whip. That's it. That's the story. It was way easier to come up with wrestling nicknames in the 30s. Watson began wrestling in Toronto for Maple Leaf Wrestling in October of 1940, and within 6 months he was the top star in the territory. The storyline went that Watson was angry he hadn't been giving a main event match in his first 6 months, so he filed a lawsuit against the promoter for breach of contract. When promoter Frank Tunney announced a one-night tournament to determine a new #1 contender, Watson filed an entry form with the Ontario Athletics Commission, forcing his entry into the tournament where he would win 4 matches in one night and became a star the likes of which Canada has only rarely seen again in pro wrestling, reigning as only the 3rd ever recognized NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. Number 3, Roddy Piper. Born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, the best name of any Canadian location outside of that one lake in Ontario that is literally called Go Home. Hey, not all Canadians are polite after all. While he may have spent his career representing his Scottish heritage with his wild Scotsman character, the man behind the kilt and bagpipes is as Canadian as a beaver tail. Piper was never one of the best technicians in wrestling. He never had a long reign as NWA World Champion or WWE Champion, but what he did do was become one of the most legendary talkers in the history of, well, anything really. The history of history. His most well-known work obviously comes from his time in WWE, where he headlined the first WrestleMania, but while it is harder to track down, his work in Portland was where the Hot Rod really solidifies himself as one of the greats of all time. His unmatched promo skills and his ability to completely hold an audience in the palm of his hand have made him one of the most influential wrestlers of all time, with his impact on today's wrestlers still being crystal clear. Number 2, Pat Patterson. Born in Montreal, Quebec, Pat Patterson's career can be split into 2 equally remarkable and equally significant halves: the wrestler half and the backstage half. As a wrestler, Pat Patterson was probably best known for being the first Intercontinental Champion or for being one of Vince McMahon's stooges, both of which are nothing to sneeze at, especially if you're Vince McMahon's stooge. You'll lose your job real quick if you sneeze. But Patterson's truly legendary in-ring work came much earlier in his career. For those who frequently debate the best tag teams of all time, may I present you with Pat Patterson and Ray Stevens, the Blonde Bombers, one of the legitimate contenders for the title of best tag team ever, ruling the San Francisco area for much of the 60s. However, for as good a wrestler as Pat was, his biggest lasting impact on the business will have to have been what he did behind the scenes for WWE, serving as Vince McMahon's right-hand man during his global expansion. Dave Meltzer called him one of the chief architects of the WWE, playing an integral role in helping it become a global phenomenon, and that role alone would place him high on this list. But when you combine that with his in-ring career, it becomes undeniable that Pat Patterson is one of the most significant wrestling figures to ever come out of Canada. Hell, he could have made it on here for inventing the Royal Rumble alone. And number 1, Bret Hart. Born in Calgary, Alberta, it would have been difficult to predict that the 8th of Stu and Helen Hart's 12 kids would go on to become the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, but that's precisely what happened to Bret Sargent Hart. Did you know that Bret Hart's middle name is Sargent? I didn't need another reason to be a fan of him either, but here we are. You could go over the accomplishments Bret accumulated during his career, or the classic matches he had against the likes of Mr. Perfect, Ricky Steamboat, Davey Boy Smith, Steve Austin, and his brother Owen, but that truly doesn't do Bret Hart justice. To really get the full picture of how great Bret Hart was, you can't just watch his stuff. You have to watch the stuff around it as well. You have to watch SummerSlam 1991, where Bret Hart has a legendary match with Mr. Perfect that holds up to this day, but not one other match on the entire show is watchable. This was the story of the 90s. Day after day, Bret Hart carried the WWF through its most miserable years, having consistently great matches with dudes who weren't having matches that good the week before or the week after. Bell to bell, it may be impossible to find anyone on Bret's level. He has a star on the Canada Walk of Fame, and he's the only Canadian wrestler to ever buy Mr. Burns' house. Is Bret Hart the greatest of all time? Oh yeah, no, for sure. And that's our list. If you enjoyed it, I hope you have a fantastic Canada Day, and subscribe to partsFUNknown so you don't miss out on another wrestling list just like this one. Speaking of, you can go right now and watch Adam Blancpain's latest list of the 10 best Money in the Bank ladder matches of all time, and jam that jam.